Everquest launched in 1999, launching a new era of virtual worlds to inhabit, a living and breathing world where dragons roamed. EverQuest Online Adventures tried to do something new, innovating for the genre in much the same way in 2003, launching on PlayStation 2, solely on PlayStation 2, becoming only the second console MMO behind Final Fantasy XI the year before, which was also on PC. Then in 2004, Sony Online Entertainment pinned their hopes on a graphical update to EverQuest, a fully revitalized game set in the future with at the time generational graphics for an MMO, gorgeous animations and performances from legendary actors like Christopher Lee. It was a time of hope and expectation, with EverQuest IP riding high on the hundreds of thousands of players, shattering Western records for MMOs until... Years later, after taking their licks and falling into near obscurity, EverQuest tried again.
Wow, the day is here. Can't tell you guys how excited we are to share this moment with you guys. It means more to us that our #1 fans are here, assembled in this ballroom, to watch the unveiling of something that is a real passion and a dream for us to have made. You know, EverQuest Next is kind of an interesting story because it's been remade. This is the 3rd remake of the game. You guys actually, those of you that were here that year, actually got to see the #2 remake. You didn't even get to see the first one. It is incredibly, incredibly important to us that when we launch the next EverQuest, because EverQuest was the genre-defining game in its day, it was important to us that we actually make something that was equally monumental, something that would blow your mind, something that would make you feel like, wow, this is what online gaming is going to be for the next 15 years.
An MMO promising the world from destructible environments to an AI gaming startup in Storybricks that promised emergent AI for storytelling long before people were using ChatGPT to cheat on tests in school. However, the promised 4th EverQuest would never see the light of day. Cancelled amid a reshuffling that damaged player trust, sank the IP, and caused the jettison of many key figures within the organization. With SOE selling their entire company, Daybreak emerging from the wreckage under investor ownership, and after a hard 9 years of regrowth, we have the faintest wisp of a future for a franchise that forever changed the landscape of mmorpgs. Is it true? Is EverQuest 3 or 4 an actual possibility? Could it work? Will it actually launch, or is this just a bunch of misplaced hope of people like me who are just delirious? Well, I picked this shirt for a reason, because if Fippy can keep going, then why can't EverQuest? This is a video that's part of a new series that's kind of going to be looking at my hopes and fears for upcoming MMOs as we get closer to new information. Now, closer to new information is probably why this game is an outlier, because it's perhaps the one we have the least amount of information about. But given my love for EverQuest and the fact that I have been around that game and that IP in so many different ways for over 2 decades, it just felt right. If there are other MMOs you would like to see like this, let me know down in the comment section and we'll kind of get into it. But let's start, before we get into the hopes and fears, with a little bit more detailed history of EverQuest and the IP and how this came about. EverQuest was built on the foundation of scarce new MMOs that existed before it, like Ultima Online, by looking at tabletop RPGs like Dungeons & Dragons, using those foundations as it charted a PvE-focused dungeon running path of class roles and interdependence. The architecture of the game was clear, the timing of it was perhaps even more influential. At a time when Discord didn't exist, many people were still using dial-up internet, and you actually had to rent movies at Blockbuster. and you can afford a house, so that's cool. EverQuest gave everyone from socially awkward as fuck kids like myself to adults with jobs and shit a place to call home. Launching in 1999 and hitting peak player counts of nearly 500,000 before a decline due to various factors from 2004 on, EverQuest continues in several iterations as well as its own live version, which just celebrated 25 years and over 30 expansions. It went on to spawn several sequels and a promise: EverQuest Online Adventures, one of the first console MMOs, EverQuest 2, an MMO designed to replace EverQuest that launched 5 years after the original, but never hit its peak. And of course the ill-fated EverQuest Next and its Minecraft-adjacent world builder Landmark that fizzled into nothingness during the darkest period of EverQuest's IP as it went from one developer and publisher to the next, including a shady investor in Columbus Nova that found itself in all kinds of trouble before finally landing with EG7 in 2020. It was around 2018-2019 we heard the first rumors of another attempt at an EverQuest 3 from an interview between Holly Longdale and the EverQuest show.
As my interview with Holly winds down, there were still two big questions that I had yet to ask.
So I know we've got your public relations person over to the side here. So I'm gonna ask a question where she may cut this interview short. But a lot of people have asked, what are you guys going to do with the intellectual property?
Oh, yeah.
So is there another game in development?
I can't talk about what's in development, but I promise you there's a future for EverQuest. I promise you. There's a lot of work has gone into evaluating our past. We're in a really unique position that we have up to more than 20 years of data on players and what they like in MMOs and the MMOs that we've made. Why wouldn't we take advantage of that when we craft something new for EverQuest?
That was a brilliant answer, and I'm jumping out of my seat right now, and I'm sure she is too.
She's like, shut up.
Okay, so that's all I could get about a future game.
While there may be a future for EverQuest, Holly wouldn't be a part of it, as she would go on to leave EverQuest and start work on World of Warcraft Classic, leaving the game in the hands of Jen Chan, who's worked for either SOE or Daybreak for almost 2 decades. It's under EG7 where rumors have swirled around the EverQuest IP for years before coming to a head with this slide from one of their investor conferences in 2023. We'll be referencing that slide a lot, because it is perhaps the most important piece of information we have on the game. Supposedly, a new EverQuest MMO will be starting development in 2025, this year, with a target release date of 2028, using a hybrid premium and microtransaction monetization. This was followed up by confirmations from current studio head Jen Chan during an interview this time with MinMax.
Will there ever be an EverQuest 3?
I hope so. We're working on a new EverQuest game.
Oh, really? Cool.
We're working on a new EverQuest game. I don't know if it's going to be called EverQuest 3.
Why wouldn't it? Who's saying no to that?
EverQuest 2 was kind of a curse to EverQuest 1 because we thought that everyone would leave EverQuest 1 and go to EverQuest 2.
Right.
They didn't.
In theory, would you want to like jump hundreds of years in the future again?
Right now, I'm thinking no. Our probably best bet is EverQuest. EverQuest 1.
A reboot type of thing?
Yeah, like a reboot where it's like our big characters are our big characters. Fippy's there and Fernavy's there. Tracking on one of our big dragons is there. Modern visually, modern in gameplay, and modern in style. But holy EverQuest. When you look at it, you need to go, oh my god, this is Kinos. All that to say, it's still in concept.
Of course.
A lot of things can change between now and when we actually get to even just pre-production, where we're ramping up the team, where it's like, okay, all these things that we're going to do, let's prototype it. Let's prove it can happen. Let's
So
white
many
box
things
it.
can change. Oh, yeah.
There was also brief mention during the PAX East panel, as well as some deep diving into seeing some of the things that they were hiring for, some of the positions they were hiring for, so we at least know that there is a will and a desire to make this happen. But the game is being worked on in some capacity. It is the depth of that capacity, whether just, oh, it's an idea that we have, that really brings us to a lot of the fears and a lot of the hopes that come with this. Let's start with a good thing. Let's start with the hopes of the game. My first hope is that it will actually launch. This had to be it, right? The hope that among all the other hopes of EverQuest fans that have been dashed along the hard f***ing seawall of reality, this one will somehow make it to launch. At this point, it's not as much a hope that it will be good as a hope that it won't be kneecapped before it even gets a chance to try. One of the feelings I got from FippyFest and from PAX East watching Jen Chen and others that are currently stewarding EverQuest in this post-SOE era, they care about this IP and they want this to happen. But at the same time, I get the feeling that the devs working on EQ Next also wanted it to come out. So desire to do something and the reality are obviously two different things. Honestly, shit, is it bad that my first hope is full of a whole lot of concern? I think that kind of shows the tone of this video. The second hope is kind of, actually in a little way, soft confirm, at least that this is the direction they're going in right now. It will be a remake. There's a drastic difference between the EverQuest IP in and around 2014, or even more keenly pre-2004 than it is right now, with how the game has kind of shifted into the background, but also how the company itself has. SOE was a much larger entity and seemingly more willing to push the EverQuest IP pre-World of Warcraft. We got EverQuest books, EverQuest TTRPGs, EverQuest RPGs made by big name studios like Snowblind, RTS games like Lords of Norath. They broke into the console MMO market when there wasn't even really a console MMO market. They gobbled up Vanguard Saga of Heroes, launched DCUO, a dragon MMO, tried to capitalize on a younger demographic with games like Free Realms and the Clone Wars MMO. Basically, they were trying a lot and seeing what stuck to the wall. Daybreak under Columbus Nova, on the other hand, for that brief horrid period, looked like it was ready to be sold off for parts or destroyed, some sort of write-off following the collapse of EverQuest Next and Landmark and such. This also saw the closure of many other MMOs under their stable. Then we get this little sliver of hope after a whole bunch of scandal with Columbus Nova, ended with Daybreak getting sold off again. We learned that Daybreak owns Lord of the Rings Online in kind of a weird way. We saw a gradual increase in attention to EverQuest beyond their usual expansions as they began to test more things, settle into annual schedules for progression servers, and most recently began to push deeper into the public eye with PAX panels and FippyFest, and of course most recently, the MinMax interview, which revealed that EverQuest 3 was in ideation, but also tying to a very clear idea that despite all of this, despite EG7's ambitions, this is not SOE. This is not trying to create a genre-defining MMO that will set the tone for games to come with destructible worlds, story brick branching stories, heroic movement, multi-classing, and no leveling. Hell, do y'all even remember that EverQuest Next wasn't actually set in EverQuest lore? It was supposed to be this like alternate universe thing. And that's where I think they're going the right way so far. They're not trying to do that, at least from the sounds of it. A remake makes it sound more like they're going to stick to the things that they know. They're going to stick to the things that work and the lore that's already present. They're not going to have to do nearly as much work, for example, on all of this because it already exists. Ambition, or even such a divergent direction for the game, may have been the nail in the coffin for EverQuest Next. Even EverQuest 2 felt like a branch from the EverQuest tree, despite its quest hub-based trappings, elite NPCs, and degradation of the crowd control role. It was still linked to the DNA of EverQuest, with great additions like housing and a more coherent world lore, even if it seemingly lacks something to it, at least to me. My hope is that realizing they do not have the resources to make an ambitious project like EverQuest Next, that they will retread what they know. This doesn't mean a strict one-to-one remake of EverQuest, nor a strict one-to-one remake of EverQuest 2. My hope is they look at what has worked for them over 25 years, over all of these different MMOs, and see what most of their players right now that are currently still playing EverQuest or still playing EverQuest 2 want, as well as looking outward to see what other things are working in the industry. And I realize that many people are going to be upset by me saying this, that me saying, no, I don't think a one-to-one remake is going to be the most successful version of this. And by successful, I'm not talking about this game hitting 2 million players. I'm literally talking about this game being sustainable, because I don't think you can recapture, rebottle what EverQuest was and just put it out into the market now. Just in general, because things have changed. The methods of communication have changed, expectations have changed, and the UI sure as hell needs to be a lot better. I don't think you can go with a game right now that has a warrior class that all you do is press auto attack and then kick every 6 seconds. I think that if you look at EverQuest and how it has evolved over time, there's a vast difference in EverQuest now as it exists and EverQuest as it existed in 1999. They have a whole history of that to look over and see where they went wrong and see where they went right. So essentially, my hope is them to do something that I'm not entirely sure I can conceptualize. Capture the spirit of EverQuest, but bring it to a place where it still feels good and not old. But now, let's talk about my fears. And there's really 2 major ones. The first and most obvious fear has to be that it just won't happen. And that's not just because it's still in this fragile state of pre-production where they're hiring but also still gauging formative interest. Part of that fear actually comes from what happened to Lord of the Rings Online, which actually had an announced remaster and UI rework which were scrapped due to costs and perceived lack of return on investment. That essentially a remaster of Lord of the Rings Online would cost as much as making a new MMO. And that remaster was actually technically more properly announced than EverQuest 3 has been, and yet it still got cut by EG7, who, as a reminder, owns EverQuest. I was hoping I'd see some mention of EverQuest 3 in the Q1 financials of EG7, but so far, nothing. This is so important because from that first-party game slide, 2025 was the start of investment for the game with a target release of 2028. I'd love to see that slide get updated with their current plans and progress. But the next fear I think might not be as obvious unless you're just playing MMOs over the last 10 to 15 years, but no less worrying. Since EverQuest launched back in 1999, it's gone through a lot of iterations in how they monetize, from box and sub only to free-to-play options, to an increasingly aggressive store, to chrono, which are essentially RMT currencies, and now even adding optional sub perks like extra bag slots, bonus experience, and such. But it's not EverQuest 1 and their monetization that worries me the most, even if I freaking hate Chrono. It's EverQuest 2. EverQuest 2, despite being the sequel, has always been smaller than EverQuest 1, never hitting the highs of EQ1, or really never working out the way they had expected with people moving on from EQ1 to EverQuest 2. What I've seen over the last few years in EQ2 at times appears to kind of be a testing ground for some aggressive monetization that probably wouldn't fly in EverQuest 1 with their larger player base. Basically, boundary testing. From paid research to get higher level spells to accusations of pay to win with raid chests, which allowed players to pay money to get more loot chances. We already know from that slide that the business model is going to be a hybrid premium with microtransactions. So basically what EverQuest, EverQuest 2, Lord of the Rings Online, etc. all have right now. The biggest question for me is, will they get too greedy? We all know games cost money, but monetization is the constant seesaw between not enough to fund the game and too much to where it relies only on whales funding the game and degrading the experience for the vast majority of players to where they either feel forced to spend money they don't want or just not play. I kind of see this in like a continuum of maybe if you consider like Embers Adrift on the needing more money to fund the game to basically Diablo Immortal making the game so unplayable with too many microtransactions that it essentially works by working on those whales and only those whales. It's never going to be a game that has mass adoption. It's a game that digs into your pocket and that's it. And I guess the people that like it digging into their pocket enjoy it because it's still going. But those are my hopes and fears for an EverQuest 3. Although they won't be calling it EverQuest 3. A game that may forever just live in our minds. Or may be the thing that we have been waiting for over a decade. There's a lot more to unpack, like the issues of failed promises from EQ Next and Landmark, pre-orders, founders packs, forced closure of MMOs like Vanguard Saga of Heroes, SOE selling off everything, being bought out by investment companies, basically the whole lot of shit that happened, and how they could have potentially forever damaged this IP to a place where it can't really recover. My hope for that, my biggest hope, and perhaps this is just the general hope, not just for EverQuest 3, but for Daybreak, is that having this ability to hire new people, to really work on something new, not just the thing that they know they're going to be working on, like a new expansion, but work on something new, entirely new, get those creative juices going, get that creative process going, that this helps revitalize Daybreak in ways that continuing on their current trajectory won't. That this kind of helps break them from that quagmire of stink from when they swung and missed so terribly with EverQuest Next. But whatever happens, whatever way this game comes about, you know I'll at least be trying it, because I will always go back to Norath. Side note, if anyone from Daybreak happens to be watching this video, what about a Champions of Norath 3? Lords of Norath 2? Just throwing that out there. My name is Redbeard Flynn. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you have an absolutely wonderful day.